Good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Levine Show. It's a Friday episode. It's the end of the week, and we're going to finish up with a friend at the end on a Friday. Theo Fleury came on my show several months ago. He was one of the first, really big names. I was so excited that he was coming on, and I thought, let's just talk about hockey and maybe the Olympics and get into some things. But he opened up completely to me. He shared his story, his heartache, and the struggles that he was going through, but then the journey that he went on in order to recover. And he found that, making sure that adults' trauma is taken care of. Most problems that people have is due to some sort of trauma, whether they were inflicted to some, had some, or were part of some trauma. It was really important for him to bring to light the fact that adults have trauma. And I had no idea what was going to happen at the end of that episode, other than I was pretty giddy that I had Theo Fleury on, right on. But I received a message from a gentleman who reached out, and he heard Theo live and paid attention to what he was saying. And he basically said, "Me too." And then he explained to me how he had filled out a MAID's application because life was so difficult. The pain was so hard. The trauma was so real. But then he told me he ripped it up. He ripped it up. I had no idea when I booked Theo on and had the episode that we would do something like that. You don't think that. You don't plan that. You don't make that happen. It just does. And then we saw him at the NCI. Theo was there at Edmonton. We were there. Are children safe was the big question. Are they safe in Canada? It seems like a rhetorical question on its surface, but when you sit down and think about it, well, we got sexualization in schools. We got mature minor maids. And we still have sexual trafficking for children. So at the end of this entire thing at the NCI, it was clear. The question should be, how do we save our children? Because it's a given already. They're not safe. When Theo testified at the NCI, that room was quiet. It was packed. It was quiet. Even the mice were quiet. There was no sounds. And then after that, we kept reflecting back on Theo's testimony. Ted Kuntz, at the end of that day, he gives a speech at the end and reminds everybody what we're there for. And he brought up Theo's testimony. Touched him hard. Next day, he did the same thing as we were recapping the entire event. Let's never forget Theo's testimony here today. Or that was yesterday at that time. Because it's absolutely, these are the types of conversations we have to have. Now, Theo's been in front of the CBC cameras while he skated around the ice. Hockey Night in Canada, CBC. They weren't there during the NCI. Should have been. Was more important than our children and the truth about them. I had the honor to be the media, help out with the media, get the message out. But more Canadians need to hear this. As flattered as I am that he comes on my platform, I'm pushing this because more Canadians need to hear these kind of stories. Not just because Me Too is something that a lot of people say. And as he explained during his testimony, people come up to him all over the place now and say Me Too. But that also can lead to things like giving yourself another chance, seeking help for healing with your trauma, and then ripping up a MAID's application. I am incredibly honored to call him a friend. I'm incredibly honored that he's come back again. And now we're going to get into what the government's doing to us. Pedophiles use this thing called grooming. Not a new term. We heard it before, but better not say that in Ontario. You can get yourself in trouble. And what is grooming? Well, it's a systemic type of way of trying to get somebody to build trust, and then you can do whatever you want to them. They'll stay quiet. They won't resist. They won't fight. They'll let it happen. And the government's doing that to us. As a victim of this, it's almost like super easy for him to see the same pattern. Attack, demoralize, dehumanize, prop you up, beat you down, hit you, try and make you feel better. I won't do it anymore. And then they do it some more. It's a pattern. And we call it grooming. Has the government been grooming us all this time? Maybe you're one of the lucky ones and you didn't go through this kind of childhood trauma, so it's not easy for you to see. But when you have gone through it, you see it. So Theo let us know during the NCI testimony, the government's grooming us just like a pedophile. So he's here today to go ahead and have that conversation with us. We'll dig in a little bit deeper. We'll get into the politics, and we got a lot of problems now. Carney's in. He's already doing a bunch of things. We're looking at a snap election possibly announced this weekend. Oh boy. If you don't know the signs of grooming, you don't understand the trauma, you may be in trouble. So we need voices like Theo out there talking to us nationally and doing more than just scoring a bunch of goals for us and winning gold. He's going to heal people just by having conversations. Without further ado, let's go ahead and have Theo. Good evening. How are you doing,
Hey,
my friend?
How are you?
I'm good, but I'm preparing myself for this conversation because after your testimony at the NCI, we needed a moment. So thank you for that raw testimony and reminding us what we need to be watching and focused on.
Yeah. Well, I read, the phrase conspiracy theorist is actually means pattern recognition. Okay. And it's among the highest signs of intelligence is when you can recognize patterns. Okay. And, obviously being a kid who was groomed by one of the most notorious pedophiles on the planet, I started to see a very similar pattern with how, I guess Justin Trudeau would probably be, the head groomer, being the Prime Minister of Canada, when the pandemic started. And, there was a few months there where I relived all of that trauma going through the beginning parts of the pandemic, right? And fell into a deep, dark depression and didn't know why, right? I just, I was traveling everywhere at that point. I was helping people. I was healing people. I was giving speeches. I was, I was on a roll. And then everything shut down, and then my old anxiety started kicking up because we all didn't know if this virus was the real deal. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it was 24/7. Campaigning on TV, right, about this virus, and so my old patterns, started to repeat themselves, right? And at that time, I guess I wasn't healed enough to be able to, overcome that, right? But I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped showering, like it was ugly, right? And then I booked an appointment with my therapist, and we were talking obviously on Zoom because I couldn't go see her. And I don't know if anybody's ever done EMDR therapy, but it is one of the probably greatest modalities for people who have post-traumatic stress disorder. And obviously I was experiencing some PTSD at the beginning of COVID. And basically what PTSD is it's the movie that keeps playing in your head, right? And for me, I was molested in a dark room, right? So I could never see my abuser. And like he had a bed, it was in his bedroom, but he had a big bed where he slept. And then I slept on a cot. And so, and all the windows were tin foiled. And, when the lights got turned off, it was completely black, right? And so, he would wait till I fell asleep, and then I would get woken up in the middle of the night, and then he would obviously rape me, repeatedly over a 2.5 year period. So, whenever I was ever alone in a dark room, right, which was most of my NHL career, because I spent, I don't know how many nights in hotel rooms, that image would continually appear, right? And then I'd be filled with fear and terror and you name it, right? So that's kind of what I was experiencing at the beginning of COVID. And so I booked this appointment with her, and I started to talk about what was going on. And she basically said, well, think about, the grooming process. What happens in the grooming process? Well, I go, you're manipulated, you're coerced, you're lied to. And she goes, well, what about this time reminds you of that? And I was like, well, government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, at that time, we didn't know if we were going to be forced vaccinated or not, right?
Right.
And, I was not going to get vaxxed no matter what. If they dragged me out of my house, it was not going to be fun for them. There's no way I was putting that shit in my arm no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And so, having these visions of, people breaking down my door and, costing me in the middle of the night and dragging me out and force vaccinating me, that kind of stuff, right? Which maybe for some people that might be, a little bit too extreme, but, but yeah, they have been grooming us for a long time, a very, very long time. I think even before, Trudeau got in power. But, you got to remember that, the Macrons, the Merkels, who's the Dutch guy? What was his name?
Sorry,
Rude, I think his name is.
Okay.
Justin Trudeau. The gal in New Zealand there, what's her name?
It was a pop quiz. I'm sorry. I remember her face.
Yeah, I do too.
She had that long face.
Yeah. The Prime Minister of Australia all went to Klaus Schwab's school of psychopaths, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So you talk about this has been planned for a lot longer than, just leaked out of a Wuhan lab, you know what I mean? Like, and so I saw these leaders just like grooming people like all day, every day, threatening people and all this stuff. And I was just like, this is insane. This is completely insane. And nobody's really talked about, like, especially in the freedom sort of space, all the independent media, nobody's really talked about the psychology of what went on in the last 5 or 6 years. Nobody's really talked about it, right? And so, when I got asked to speak at the NCI, I wanted to make sure that, I made a point of talking about the psychology of COVID-19, that evil grooming, and then, and then they brought in so much other stuff to distract us from what was going on, like the grooming of the drag queens, like that kind of stuff. And you name it. It was just like, it was too much for me. Right. But, I always look at struggle as an opportunity to grow, opportunity to heal, maybe look at some old wounds, all that stuff. So, for me, the blessing in it is that I have fully healed that piece of me. And I'm grateful that, that I have, a pretty extensive toolbox of tools that I can use now to not only heal myself, but, to heal anybody who, is looking for, healing.
And Ardennes, I think it is, for New Zealand.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Jacinda. Yes, the crack smoking Prime Minister of New Zealand. Crazy.
And there was a Young Global Leaders program. So we even have Jagmeet Singh from that. There's
Yeah.
some CPC members from that, lots of liberals from that. And as we saw this COVID thing happen, it didn't matter if you were Labor, Liberal, Conservative. All the governments were doing it. All the governments were doing it.
Yeah.
And that was
still haven't said boo about any of it. Not even Trump, which is wild. Wild. Like, what is there? 17 million people are dead and 550 million people are injured, and not one peep out of anybody.
No, it takes conversations.
You want to talk about grooming of society? Well, that's it right there, right? The simple fact that there are 17 million people who are no longer here who took the vaccine, and then there's 500 million people who are injured, and people aren't outraged, people aren't losing their shit, and we continue to elect communist, Marxist, fascist governments all over the world. That to me is the epitome of the grooming process, is you fall in love with your abuser.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you get Stockholm syndrome. And next thing you know, you're lining up, voting for the same guy who's traumatizing you day after day after day. Right?
You even defend them viciously. You go after people who are trying to talk sense into you. That it's brutal. It's brutal. You bring it up and you're like, don't you remember? Like, for example, Polyev, he wanted faster vaccinations. That was his critique, not stop it, more. And we forgot that. Not all of us, but when you talk to a CPCer, they're like, don't worry. That was like 3-4 years ago. Can't we get past that? Carney's a bigger problem.
We just had a mass murder committed on the planet, and you want to move on?
That's their message.
Well, I know, but what does that say about you as a person? Like, where are you at that you're willing to accept that? You know what I mean? Like, so
that's Stockholm syndrome, though, right? You'll defend your
100%, 100%. So like I have to wonder myself, like when did one human life stop mattering? You know what I mean? Like, that's not the way I grew up, Jason. I'm sure it's not the way you grew up. I know you're a very compassionate, loving, caring guy, and you care about people, right? And, I'm that same guy. And so, I get criticized all the time on social media that I'm fucking crazy and I've lost my mind. And well, it's because I exposed that I had some mental health issues, 20 years ago. And so now you got to bring that to the table, right? To try and traumatize me even more than I already was. Like, what kind of person are you? Right? Well, the government is breeding people like that, right?
Right from school. Like, and there's a type of indoctrination that we went through, which was don't question authority, make sure that you do what they say, the best interest is coming from them. And it wasn't until later in my adult life that I realized, no, they don't. They have their interest, not even Canada's interest.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what the motivations or who their leaders are and who the puppet masters are. Not me. I know that.
Well, and on the other side of the coin, like, you gotta know that all those people I named earlier, they all have trauma too, right?
Right.
Because hurt people, right? And so obviously, their mental illness has advanced to that next level of narcissism, psychopath, right? That's the next level. You know what I mean? And so we're not sure yet if people are born that way or their experience being traumatized over and over again, takes you to that next level of craziness, right? And so another thing I explained in my testimony was trauma, mental health, and addiction all live in the same house. They are not separate. They all play a part in this crazy world that we live in, right? Because we're traumatized, right?
Yep.
And that leaves us in emotional pain and suffering, right? Silent, can't see it, right? And we've created a society where we can't talk about negative emotions or negative feelings, So we just keep them inside, right? And then when we keep them inside and we stuff them down, eventually what happens is an internal explosion happens inside of our body. And it's called anger, okay? And who do we hurt? We hurt the people that we love the most when we go through this cycle, right? Or we mask it with, the dark side of life, coping mechanisms.
Correct.
Addiction, right? Addiction is a great thing to suppress negative emotions. And so alcohol, drugs, food, sex, gambling, anything that,
distracts.
Or as a politician, acquiring power over people is another addiction, and probably the worst addiction to have. And when you look at most of the left politics, when they lose power, you see how they act? They completely lose all touch of reality, right? The Chuck Schumers, the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, the Justin Trudeau's of the world, these kind of people, is because who am I if I don't have power? Who am I if I can't abuse people, right?
They lose their identity as the abuser.
Yeah. But they also have a chemical reaction in their body where they don't need outside drugs to get the high that they need, right? Which is scary shit, scary stuff, And
well, let's remember what they did. They called essential services and they left the beer stores open, the marijuana stores open, closed the gyms. And that's a type of indoctrination and grooming. You can do this stuff, go and do this stuff, but don't do this stuff. Yeah. All the healthy stuff, even parks. I still remember them putting plywood and pieces of wood across basketball hoops just to physically make it difficult to even use this. Chains on the park gates.
So for them to set up that kind of system, how insane are these people that they know exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it? It's like premeditated, like insanity, right? Scary stuff, man.
Remember Quebec had curfews?
Oh, yeah.
And they had neighbors calling on neighbors. So now you live in a society where you feel your government's after you, federal, provincial, municipal. Your neighbors are after you. Even some of your friends and family will turn you in. Yep. You're creating a paranoid, schizophrenic type of environment artificially onto normal, healthy people. You take away the healthy outlets. You give them only the vices. And you're going to create, more than grooming, you're actually creating mental illness.
For sure.
Put them in that environment.
Because if you're, a perfect example is, I always say when I'm on stage, basically for the last 6 years, we've drank cortisol milkshakes. Well, what is a cortisol milkshake? Well, cortisol is our stress hormone that we create when we're in fear or, we we can't afford to buy food, or we can't afford to put gas in our car. This cortisol, just continually is produced. Well, cortisol is like acid in our body, and eventually it starts to, destroy the nervous system, right? And then you have people who have panic anxiety attacks and depression and suicidal ideation, and all of these things happen, right? So the counter to that cortisol is something we produce when we're in a healthy, loving relationship, which is oxytocin. And oxytocin is the drug of love and connection. And so oxytocin's job is to go in and suck up all the cortisol, right? That's its job, right? So when you think about, when you think about big pharma, so big pharma knew that we were all messed up in relationship. We couldn't connect to each other. And so they created a drug called Oxycontin. Well, Oxycontin, oxytocin. Sound familiar? Well, when you look at these two substances underneath a microscope, they look exactly the same, except Oxycontin has one little extra arm on it that makes us want and need more and more of it, right? And so, I work with a lot of, fentanyl, oxy, heroin users, and I say, why are you guys so crazy about this stuff? And they go, well, it gives me the warm and fuzzies.
Right.
So big pharma has created a drug that has replaced human connection and relationship. How fucked up is that?
Well, and you take it a step further. You tell a couple parents that they're not essential. They're part of the non-essential group. You got to stay home. Your kids can't go out and see their friends. You put all these people into this little box. You make them afraid of anything and everything. They put their groceries in the foyer for a couple days because they're worried about it. Stress. And what's going to happen? Anger.
Yeah.
You get domestic issues, some violence, suicide, other things. You're destroying the family. Like they went through this whole removing of the man from the family, the father. Mm-hmm. Now they took this other one, which was, let's put him into this box and keep poking them. And human nature is to respond at some point. And what are we responding to? Well, the destruction of the own family.
Yeah.
The relationships with their kids, with their wife, with their husband.
Yeah. That's
cruel. I think it's beyond cruel. That's evil.
Yeah. Well, you said it. That's exactly what it is. Like I don't think at any point in history of the planet we've had more evil than we have right now. Makes
now
me
for that, does it make you feel like you're in that dark room again? There's so much evil and darkness around you.
No, because I found God. I found a relationship with God.
You got the light.
Yeah. And every time I walk out the door, I'm wearing the suit of armor of God, right? And so I was always afraid of death, like I was almost a hypochondriac, and I had to work really hard to get rid of that as well, because, that crept in too a lot at the beginning of COVID as well. My fear of dying, right? And
that
then
invisible enemy was everywhere, wasn't it?
Yeah. And then, I started hanging around people in the freedom movement who were all, people of faith, and I saw in their eyes that there was no fear. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start praying. I'm going to start meditating. I'm going to start, building a healthy relationship with God again. And I actually asked God, to take away the fear of death. And he did,
Good.
Just like he took away, the obsession to drink and do drugs. He took that away too, and so, and that's, that's when I made that decision, right? I think we all had that, decision we had to make. Am I going all in on this, or am I all out and I'm not going to say anything, right? And I said, I can't live with myself if I don't, participate in trying to get us out of this insanity.
Right.
And then, I think I had 80,000 followers on Twitter or something. And then I started commenting about government, and quickly, I got over 300,000 followers. I'm just like, this is insane. You know what I mean? But,
Yeah.
but I know that I gave people a lot of strength and a lot of courage and a lot of hope, because I remained very consistent through this whole thing. And, Brandon University tried to cancel me and take away my honorary doctorate, and I just shoved it right back in their faces. They had a sexual abuse scandal on their campus that they buried, that I actually found and brought it up, and then they kind of just went away. You know what I mean? But, I think, if you wanted to be canceled, you would have been canceled. But, there was no way I was going to be canceled by a bunch of cowards, like the government are, And then I saw the truckers, and that just gave me a whole new, like steel rod in my back,
That's right. That's a lot of us. We're not alone.
Right.
You had 300,000 people that were looking for answers and messages.
Yeah. And then, to watch, Trudeau and the Liberals, and, probably all 338 just kind of sit back and watch them abuse, peaceful protesters in Ottawa, and beat them up and run them over with horses and arrest them and, all that. And yeah, it was just so disheartening to see that, that's the country that I now live in, is, of a bunch of cowardly politicians who are supposedly representing the people, right? Because we vote them in, and our tax money pays for their salaries, and here they are abusing us more and again and over and over and over. And I just I couldn't sit by and watch it, and I started calling them out.
That ended up being another type of grooming, because we haven't had we never had another protest. People are very afraid.
Well, the freedom movement hasn't been the same since.
Canadians haven't been the same since.
They're infighting with each other, and it's just become a shit show. We were united, and then the government scared the shit out of everybody, and everybody was carrying around that old anxiety and depression from being locked down and all that, and so they became angry, and quickly, like you said, and quickly the freedom movement got divided, just like everybody else on the planet, and people got scared of losing their jobs and having their bank accounts frozen and all that, and
but you also said you abused the ones you love around you. Yeah. That is the movement itself. We started to abuse the ones around us.
Yeah. And
classic.
And here we are. With, like, drives me nuts when they say Prime Minister Mark Carney. Like, huh? What? The Laurentian elites appointed him as the Prime Minister of Canada. I didn't vote. Did you vote yet?
Nope.
Prime Minister?
He got the same number of votes that I did in the last election.
Exactly. And so here we are now. Like, we're on the edge of, full-blown communism.
But you see the cycle from your perspective. The abuser's gone, this other guy's in, and all of a sudden everybody just comes flocking right back to him. And they don't realize that this is the abuser of the abuser. Like, this guy is worse.
Yeah, like, this guy is one of the groomers who groomed Justin to be this crazy person. You know what I mean? But, I've lost my mind. I'm completely mentally incapable of, stringing together two thoughts, yeah.
I was under a lot of attack a year and a half ago when I started saying, Carney, watch out next PM. Because at that time, they were pulling back the media on Justin. You could hear the booing from the crowds. You can tell that the elites was exposing him. His wife left. There's other things were starting to happen. But what people didn't know was Carney was selling property and looking at property in Canada. And I called it then. I have a friend who kind of showed me the light, and I'm like, oh boy, he's coming. Because he is the global banker, not a global banker. The global banker. And he's got a legacy. And I do believe his legacy that he wants to put into place is tying the resources and output of all the countries to the global banking system through debt chains. And he's headed right there. One of the things we are having a conversation about is this loony dollar system. Carney was selected on March 10th. On March 12th, he sent out to all the banks, including credit unions, this new scheme, which is to have U.S.-backed currency called the loony dollar to devalue the U.S. currency through the European and Canadian markets. On day 2, there's no way that this wasn't already ready to go. And why is he creating all of this new stuff if he's going through an election that he may not lose? No, he's selected. He's ready. He basically had this document, all documents, by the way, is a lot more, ready to go. And of course, his prime competitor was Freeland, who has a child whose godfather is Carney. These people are all friends. They grew up in the same groups. It's a club. It's a big one. We're not in it. And it was theater. And Canadians just ate it right up. They just ate it right up.
Well, they're just lapping it up now. It's unbelievable. But, we're at a point in Canada now where everybody's so desperate to have somebody come and save them that, he's positioned himself as this, savior, But I heard a great one today. He showed up at the Oilers practice, and I was just like, Prime Minister? What? The Prime Minister is skating with the Oilers? I go, what Prime Minister? And I go, ha ha ha, LOL. I go, global communist? Yeah, but not Prime Minister, I had this one guy, he said, well, he's Harvard educated and ran the bank of, I'm like, yeah, Harvard is a communist institution that spits out communists, And I go, Wall Street have some of the biggest criminals on the planet.
Right.
Do you not
remember 2008 and that global collapse,
But this is what we're dealing with. And
I had some Canadians reach out when I was in January. I said, look, he's going to be a PM. And they're like, he can't be. He has to be an MP. I'm like, no. That's not how this works in Canada. They're appointed, not elected as PM. And then somebody goes, well, he's going to have to watch from the cheap seats because he doesn't have a seat. I'm like, no. He's not going to be questioned. He's going to do whatever he wants in the PMO, and he doesn't have to stand in front of the House and be questioned. This is the best setup for him.
So do you think because of this new wave of people changing their minds, because, the conservatives at one point, but the conservatives at one point had how big of a lead? Like 22 points?
But keep in mind, it was a super majority that was projected, but that was the pandering from the left brought them over.
So now there's been a big switch. So do you think that by calling the election supposedly on Sunday, right? Do you think now the Liberals feel that their greatest chance at cheating in the election is now?
Yes, and for two reasons. Singh turned them down because there was going to be this bill that they were going to pass, a spending bill, and I guess he didn't make a deal with him because they're calling this election before the proroguing is done. So there's no chance for the non-confidence motion now. So they're preempting and all that. And this is probably the best chance for them at this stage now. because what's coming, Canadians are going to be pissed. So they're still in the honeymoon phase, right, with Carney, and they're taking advantage of that.
Right.
Yeah, I was expecting it to be a later election because they were going to have a spending bill with Singh in order to buy the election, but it looks like Singh may have.
Well, Singh's broke.
It could be the end of the NDP. They could become non-party status now.
The NDP are broke. So I saw that he said, "Oh yeah, we're ready for the election." I'm like, "Well, did you oil your 3-wheeled bike? Because that's what you're going to be traveling around in on the campaign trail." You know, they can't even afford a bus, let alone a plane.
They're broke, and their base is split tremendously because of the connections to the Liberals over the years. Yeah. It's going to be a bloodbath.
Well, have the NDP ever been elected has an NDP ever been elected as a prime minister?
No.
Exactly. So bye-bye. Like, you guys have been communists from day one. That's your whole deal. You know, we don't need communist parties in Canada. We're a democracy, right? So
supposed to be.
Right. So why do we have a NDP party, you know, at all? We don't need one, right? You look what David Ebby's doing in BC. Holy cow. Like, that guy needs to be in a psych ward, not running a province. Oh my God. He doesn't have a clue. He doesn't have a clue. He doesn't have a clue what he's doing.
That's no longer a prerequisite. Like, high intelligence, experience, Canada first, making sure that you can help your countrymen. That's no longer prerequisite. Well, now it's pretty face or other things.
Well, I see that Evan Solomon is running. So Gerald Butts and all those crazy people at Eurasia have groomed Mr. Evan, and now he's ready for politics, right?
We've seen a few of that. Andrew Lawton is also running.
Right.
So they basically kind of took any voices that were there, put them into this, and you're not going to hear Andrew Lawton talk about the CBC in a negative way. No, he's literally doing the opposite. Vote for me. We got everything.
Yeah.
But not Carney, but Poilievre was in Sudbury, and all the information I'm getting out of there is it was a comedy routine. He had the crowd laughing the entire time, laughing about crime, laughing about the price of the nickels. Like, hey, you got that big nickel. It's not worth as much anymore. Ha, ha, ha. Like, really? Like, this is your path forward? You're going to be the Joker, maybe the smoker, and the midnight toker all at the same time? Because this is not a path
forward. Do you think this whole time Pierre's just been setting us up? And when Carney came in, then he started, you know, going down that path where it's like people are like, I can't vote for this guy. He's all over the place.
Carney completely kneecapped him. Took away the carbon conversation, brought it to zero. And we saw the Liberals go, hey, look, we're great. We brought the carbon to zero. You brought it in. Like, you guys are the ones that brought, like, Carney specifically on a global level brought it in. And he didn't remove it. He just dropped it to zero.
Right.
And now you see the messaging of
but I filled up my car today. It was still $1.86. So if there's no carbon tax, that thing should be at like what, $1.10 a liter?
Well, maybe his messaging is we will drop it to zero. They haven't dropped it to zero.
Right.
So they kneecapped him on that particular one. They brought out the villain. It took out the villain Trudeau, so we can't do F Trudeau anymore.
Right.
And they brought in this new guy that goes on to late night TV all over the U.S. and has been loved by the media from the very second he even showed up.
Yeah, he didn't go on Fox.
No, of course not.
He didn't go on Newsmax. He didn't go on OWN.
No, but he was on
Jimmy. He didn't get interviewed by Tucker. Didn't get interviewed by Rogan.
Nope. No, and that just proved to you that he is an insider, not an outsider. Yeah. And this was his way of saying, hey, I'm an outsider. I'm not part of the system. How do you get on Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah, exactly.
Why do they care about a liberal?
Cares about the Prime Minister of Canada?
And he wasn't even Prime Minister then. He was just running for the leadership of the Liberal Party. Like, really? Yeah. That's the level you can get? No, he's an insider. He just
Yeah.
paid his way in, called a friend, got on there.
Mm-hmm. So
Uh,
why do you think Trump is doing what he's doing?
in that he's pushing hard or not hard enough, because I don't think he's pushing hard enough.
Right. But
I think
why isn't he telling us the truth? Why isn't
Trump.
Trump telling us the truth?
I
It's
think for
China, 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 China. And why do those guys get off the hook all the time? Why do they get off the hook?
money, money, money.
Yeah,
The
but
one
is Trump getting money from China? He knows that China is right on his northern border. Why doesn't he just tell us that?
that
Right?
could be his way of maintaining a little bit of control, have the partnership of Canada fall apart. There's something that a lot of people miss when Trump came in right away. He did an executive order for something called the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a lot of countries, oil rich countries, Middle Eastern countries, they have this. And this is where the government itself is building up profit off of investments.
Mm-hmm.
And he made the comment, well, seeing how we're going to buy 2 billion vax doses, we may as well profit from it. That came out of Trump's mouth. And people miss that one. So you got Robert F. Kennedy. Everybody's like, hey, look, he's going to save us from this. No, they're setting up a fund to profit from 2 billion vax doses. America's 300 or 400 million. So who the heck is this all for?
Right.
They're not done that plan. And I'm very worried about that one because, as you said, 17 million dead, 500 million harmed. Well, that number is going up, and you don't see that. You don't see those numbers on the TV anymore. Here's the vax harm. We're not doing that. We're talking about the COVID death, not the vax harm.
Right.
And Pierre is not doing that conversation either. That's one thing he's not touching either, is the vax harm. Dan Hartman, I was speaking to him just the other day. He is furious. He's furious. He won't touch the subject. His son is gone, but Pierre won't touch the subject.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody will. No politician will.
Nobody in there, and nobody's even using it to try and get in there.
Right.
I know I will. I'll be talking about it. When this writ is dropped, I'll be running, and I'll be doing my best. But I'm not an establishment. I'm not an elite. I'm going to have to fight that hill all the way up. I don't have the big donors or big number of donors.
Right.
Like Carney, how much did he raise? Millions. He raised millions. And then 240,000 of the voters of the Liberal Party got disqualified. And how's Canada not outraged about this? He paid $350,000 to get into the race, disqualified 240,000 voters, and has 0 votes from the public. And he's prime minister. That's the going rate right now. Didn't you know that? Don't you have $350,000? You could have been prime minister right now.
That's all it costs? Wow.
350,000. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I went through it with Joe, so I saw firsthand how that whole system works, you know.
So,
and then they, they got rid of Ruby Dalla and those other guy too, and same thing happened to Joe, you know. So
well, they saw the support all of a sudden behind those two, and then boom, you got to cut that because that's not part of our plan at all.
Exactly.
Let's get that out of it because oh my gosh, what if democracy works? That's going to screw everything up. So let's stop that. Yeah. Now let's talk about Stockholm syndrome. So that is a victim who's victimizing and protecting their victim, their abuser. How do you get out of it? How do you recognize it? And how do you get out of that?
Oh boy, that is that's a lot of deep work that needs to happen, right? And you need a very skilled person to be able to do that work. And there's not enough of those people on the planet, right? You know, I've been saying this from day one, you know, the amount of mental illness on the planet, unfortunately, there's not enough skilled people for the amount of people who need help, right? And so, which is probably they know this as well, right? The bad guys know this, right? And so they know that they have support from all of the people that they've traumatized, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but, you know, there's, and I've seen this so many times, Jason, in the, you know, in the 12-step circles that I run around in, is the people who don't grasp onto the concept of a power greater than myself
Correct. Yeah.
are the people that are no longer with us. Okay. And, you know, the first step is I am powerless and my life has become unmanageable. Okay. The third step is came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity.
Mm-hmm.
So, unless you have a come to Jesus, come to God, come to whatever moment, it is going to be very difficult for you to recover from Stockholm syndrome.
Now, one of the ways you did it, 7,120 or 30 days ago, is you asked for it.
I
You asked
surrendered.
God.
I surrendered. I surrendered. And I turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand them. And he, since, you know, 7,100 days ago, he's never left my side. Right? Because I made a commitment to him and he made a commitment to me. Right? It was mutual. It wasn't one way. It was mutual. And I've been able to overcome a lot of things because of that particular relationship that I have.
Right.
Right. And as I was walking into the NCI, I had nothing prepared, Jason. I didn't write anything down. I had nothing prepared. I said, God, this is a big moment here. This is a big opportunity. So I said, use me as a vehicle, speak
Perfect.
through me. And certainly he showed up. He showed up big time. You know what I mean? And
I do actually know what you mean.
and when I do speeches, it's the same thing. It's not about me. It's about what do you want the message to be today? Right? And use me as that messenger and speak through me.
Mm.
Right?
I feel that way too sometimes. I have no idea how I get guys like you on. I don't know how I get through the show. I don't have a script. I'm just talking.
Yep.
And I feel that way too. Now, let me share something with you. You shared with us. 2012, it was a dark time for me. Lost my sister, lost my brother, lost my mother, lost my grandmother.
Wow.
Relationship with the father got really bad, like really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before I had children. My first child was in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that stopped me at that time was I don't want my wife to find it.
Right.
So
Right.
I said, oh, what the heck? Because this was the world's coming to the end, the Mayan calendar, like all this news was just going through us. I was refreshing the earthquake report like every 2 minutes. The end is coming.
Wow.
And I said to myself, well, instead of doing that and then being discovered and her having to find me, what about God? Let's go back to that. Let's give that a shot.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, you know what? Let's do that. God, I'm yours.
Yeah.
And I have felt so good since then. From that point on, I got myself back to the point where we had a child. I went to law school, got a paralegal, did a bunch of things, got all the way to this point where I get to speak to Theo Fleury.
Right.
And that was a decision, a choice.
Mm-hmm. Made a decision to turn my will and my life over to you, sir.
Just said, it's all yours. Let's do this. And I put the laptop away, went to bed, slept. I didn't check the earthquake report again. That was the last time I did that. Amazing. Yeah, because I was really expecting, like, oh, look, there's a 3.4 over here. Oh, my gosh, another one right here.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out that's all the time. There's a ring of fire. There's earthquakes all the time, all right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, look at all of this. This is falling apart. No.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically said, well, if that's going to happen, let's go back to God. And everything improved at that point. There's still been struggles. I don't want to give the impression that it hasn't been difficult.
Yeah. But that's life, right? That's how you learn. If everything was like perfect all the time, you wouldn't learn anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You need, and resilience helps, right?
Mhm.
The only way you get to resilience is going through some really shitty times. That's how you build resilience, right? And that's why,
That's what you said in your testimony too. You said it's
yeah,
that resilience that made you who you are.
yeah, absolutely. And I've had lots of it, lots of adversity, but I am one resilient dude, and that's why I'm still here and still fighting and still have lots of hope that this thing will get turned around. Why? Because I believe at the end of the Bible somewhere, maybe it doesn't say this directly, but God does win this battle.
Yeah, it's written.
Right? So if he does win, great, and if I'm here to see it, bonus. You know what I mean? But I also know that if he feels so fit to take me out of here, I guarantee you I'm going to a way better place than I'm sitting at right now. That's for sure. You know what I mean? So, but I'm going to do all I can while I'm still here, change the course of humanity because it needs it, right? Because where we're headed is a whole lot of mass death, right? Because that's the only thing that communism spits out is mass death. And it's been proven over and over and over again.
It makes you dehumanized. You can't be special. Nothing to really shoot for. You're all just the same. You get the same piece of bread, no matter what you do. So you're demoralized, dehumanized.
Yeah. But, come and try it. Just come and try it.
Now, that's a great shield to have when you wake up and walk out in the morning and you have that shield on. It's a lot better than the hockey equipment and shoulder pads.
Way better than that. Yeah. You can still feel through the hockey equipment. You can still feel slashes and pucks and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. But this is more of an emotional shield. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because we need it. We need it because we're being bombarded and groomed and, propagandized and you name it. It's just, it's crazy. Like the Canadian media at this point is just like, you are the most disgusting, despicable human beings on the planet. Like, how do you sleep at night? Like, honest to God, you're just gross.
I bet you hard medications and other supplements.
Oh, yeah. For sure. They're all addicts. I guarantee you they're all addicts. Right? So, yeah.
But the good news,
lots of videos of Trudeau showing up at places in the morning where he could barely stand up. And, there's a few times he was drunk being interviewed at universities and stuff. So, yeah.
His brother, his half brother, has made some comments that make people wonder. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes here.
100%. Yeah. Well, if you continually go down that road, the addict road, eventually everything falls apart. You lose everything, right? And look at Justin. He's lost everything now. He is no longer, his ego's, I can't imagine what's happening with his ego right now. Can't be good.
No. A lot of people thought he'd be sticking around and be deputy prime minister or something
they were like, we got to get rid of this guy ASAP. Because if we don't, the Conservatives are going to have a super majority government. Right?
Yeah, and I was worried about that as soon as Carney was coming on. I saying, like, guys, because the cockier Conservatives got, the more worried I got. Because I've been around this block a few times.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton's going to win 90%. Oh, really? Pierre's going to win. It's a slam dunk. Oh, really? Just wait. I've been around this sun a few times. There's no guarantees. And the more that you think there is, the more likely it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen to Canada if Carney is successful and he gets himself a minority or, God forbid, a majority government in the next few months?
Well, then I think Saskatchewan and Alberta start talking about separation, right? You'll see a new independent party come to Alberta. You'll see another one come to Saskatchewan pretty quick. They'll get organized pretty quick.
Kind of
Right?
like the Reform Party back in the 80s, 90s.
Yeah, I'm thinking that. Yeah, yeah.
Do we have
I'll be
Preston Manning?
I'll be leading the charge for sure. Because
Right on.
yeah, like I know that I can probably get a meeting with Donald Trump, and you know, I will be
It,
down. I'll be down in Washington. You know,
it feels like Donald Trump is the divorce attorney. Now we're having conversations with the divorce attorney.
yep,
We're taking this kind of seriously.
yep,
But what do we need to do? What are the terms? What are the steps? What's the procedure?
yep,
And Jeffrey Rath, he was on the show last week or so, and he's putting together a delegation to do exactly that. Go and
yep.
figure out what are the
Mm-hmm.
requirements
What
to
do we
get this
got to
done.
do? What do we got to do? Yep.
Yep.
Because these guys don't think that we're capable of doing that. That's how cocky they are.
That could save Canada on so many levels.
Oh,
You
yeah.
distract Carney. If
Mhm.
Confederation's falling apart, he may have to focus on that instead of the other stuff he's doing.
Well, if I was Daniel Smith, I'd already be saying, you know what? If you get elected, those equalization payments, yeah, they're gone. We're not giving you any more money, and no more oil, no more nothing. We're done. We're done with you. It's over. History.
Pension fund, all that stuff, because those conversations kind of paused because there was a conversation with Pierre that said, hey, look, let's hold off. Let's get in there. Then we'll support you.
Mhm.
And if he's not getting in there, and there's no chance he's getting in there, Alberta needs to figure out another option.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
And
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the next few months play out. You know what I mean? So, right. But
now
I think the path will get clearer and clearer as we go along here. I think, you know what I mean? Because right now, everything's been so up in the air. Like, we don't even have a government that is sitting in parliament right now. We just have a bunch of, lunatics running around campaigning for what? Like, when's this election? Like, let's put a date on it. Like, let's get this done. Right.
I believe the day will be late April, early May.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
Spring.
is good. Which is good. And that gives us people, I'll be on social media 24/7, just exposing this loser for who he really is. And
Loser or losers?
Well, he's the head loser. We don't want him anywhere near Parliament, Ottawa, right?
Yeah. Well, the media is already getting ready. I know that the Liberal airplane's been wrapped. They're ready to go.
Right. Right. Well,
do you feel that the election will be fair? Do you think
No.
there'll be any of those shenanigans?
No. China's already in Canada, right? They're already here.
Well, did you see his cabinet?
They have lots of money. Chinese have lots of money.
Did you see Carney's cabinet? Nobody from west of Manitoba. There was like 4 or 5 foreign born, but no Western born at all.
That tells you everything you need to know.
Correct. Alberta and Saskatchewan and even BC should be paying very close attention to this.
Yep.
Those are not just accidents.
Well, I think if Saskatchewan and Alberta mount independence, BC will fall in line. They have no choice.
At least northern BC. Yeah, maybe this Vancouver might be trouble, but the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, they'll push all those other communists out of the way. They can move back to Toronto or move back to China.
That's going to happen.
Or wherever the hell they came from. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've already seen online because I did a poll. I didn't ask for separation. I just asked what the poll was. The first 2 options were if you're Albertan, yes or no. And if you're not Albertan, yes or no. Even Canada said Alberta should leave.
Yeah.
Now, if all these loyalists leave the cities and head east towards Ontario, and then all these patriots come to Alberta because they're looking forward to the future, that will slam dunk the referendum. And then we have the Clarity Act out of the Supreme Court. So basically have at least some breadcrumbs into the process. We can kind of figure this out. Do you think Quebec might jump on board as soon as it starts looking good for Alberta? Because we're not going to be paying for all their social services anymore. So they may have to reconsider what they're doing.
Yeah. But I believe they've always been followers. So, right. So they'll follow.
Yeah. Now this isn't treasonous because there's a process. It's a democratic process.
Yeah.
And I've been called that. You're a treason. Really? Why? Because we were calling for a vote?
Okay, before you call me a treasonous, what do you call Trudeau? That's what I would say. What do you call him first? Before you call me a treasonous, what do you call Trudeau?
Well, the argument now is resign.
He's already committed. I'm just talking about he's actually like physically committed treason in our country. So,
absolutely. And I've been called everything under the sun now. Everything. I'm a racist plus a race traitor at the same time. Like,
what is a race traitor?
Well, you don't believe your own race is superior. Okay. So it's the opposite of racist.
Right.
So either you think you're superior or you don't think you're superior. And I've been called both.
Well, I'm the first indigenous racist in Canada. So, yeah.
I had a wonderful woman on. Her name was Comfort. I can't get her last name right now. But she was on the board of Vancouver Police. She was one of the civilian board members. She was anti-DEI and said this is wrecking the communities. She's Black, and she got called a white supremacist.
They love
That's where we're at. That's where we're at.
They love their labels. Oh, my God. So bad.
Good news, she moved to Alberta, and she has a political future for her. So it's somebody that we should be promoting and supporting in the near future.
Awesome.
There are some good people like you kicking around.
There's lots of good people around. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure they'll all show up after Carney gets elected as Prime Minister of Canada. It's like, oh, man, what a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive.
Right?
Well, I'm optimistic with people like you around doing what you're doing every single day, working hard.
Yeah. I'm busy and, doing lots of speaking stuff and, helping lots of people and, You
want to let them know where they can find you and maybe where you
just go to my website, theofleury.life, and reach out by email if you're looking for a speaker. And other than that, I'm on social media at Theo Fleury 14 on Instagram and X. And and then obviously you can follow me on CanadiansForTruth.ca. I have my own show. Adam Seuss and I and Joseph Borgo do a live every week talking about the latest current events that are happening in Canada. And we also do live events as well with live studio audiences with great guests as well. So yeah, I'm not hard to find.
Absolutely. And you're very easy to approach, and you do shows like mine. So I'm sure people can reach out.
Of course. Yes. Yeah. If you'd like to have me on your podcast, I'd love to come on, chat.
You're awesome. And you may get a message that somebody rips up their maid's application after.
I hope so. Well, there has never been a point, I don't think, in history where, God needs to be a part of your life. And if God is a part of your life, and if you surrender to him, he will take care of you, because Jason and I are living examples of reaching out and asking for help. And help came very quickly.
Correct. That night.
Because we were both ready to commit. And if you're ready to commit, God will be there for you. I guarantee it.
I still get the chills from remembering that moment. It felt like a weight just fell off. It just felt like a skin almost just fell off.
Yeah, I know. I know the feeling, man. It was like, that 10,000 pound gorilla I'd been carrying around in my back just was gone. Right. So
God bless.
Yeah.
We're going to cut over.
Everybody out there, and thanks for listening, and thanks, Jason, for asking me to come and share my story.
Absolutely. So just hang on. We're going to just do a quick little video, a couple more questions for you, and then we'll get back to our evening. Thank you, Theo.
Okay, buddy.
All right, public, there you go. Make sure you share this out. You get this message out. This is another healing session. Theo is available. You can reach out to him, Theo Fleury 14, all over the place. And yeah, make sure you go check him out when he's speaking. And if you want him to speak, he'll do so.
Yes.
So remember, everybody, make sure you take care of yourself and your family. You shake the hand of a neighbor or a stranger. And if you see Theo, shake his hand. He'll do it. And why do I remind you to do this all the time? It's because I love you all very much. And God bless.